Welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. Good morning, I suppose, or bad morning, ghoul morning. That's what I meant to say.
Ghoul morning. Yep. There we go.
Ghoul morning, everyone. Welcome to the Smooshin' Dead Sign Hellline. Yep, it's
Wow.
Motion Design Hotline. I'm Evan Abrams, joined as usual with the bemused better half, Kyle Hamrick. How are you doing, Kyle?
I was a little bit better before you took that reach.
Well, we're trying stuff out here on the program. We weren't here last week, so we're rusty. That's the problem.
I was somewhere else. I was at Adobe Max. It was a lot of fun. If you were there, say hi in the chat.
That's true. Yeah. Let us know in the chat if you also were at Adobe Max. We'd love to know if you enjoyed stuff, what you got into, after parties, shenanigans, all that good stuff. But
if you just have Max FOMO, you can also say hi and tell us those things too.
Yeah. We don't want to prolong. Not only did you not go to Max, but don't tell us about what you didn't do at Max. I didn't go either. I miss out on a lot of things. But today we're not missing out on anything. We are, in fact, getting ahead of things so that we don't miss out on some Halloween stuff. So today we are getting into some spooky, scary Halloween title treatments. More of a, I want to say, like Goosebumps era, like some not like terrifying, but
yeah.
like,
I mean, I feel like yours is kind of closer to a little more actual horror movie. And mine has some elements of that, but I think in the way that they kind of get adapted for like a Nickelodeon tween, quote horror show.
Yeah. Are you afraid of the dark? Not like A24. Oh man, it's so twisted. What if, what if going to Europe was bad? A24. Look, I like A24 movies. I think they do interesting stuff, but a lot of it is humans are the monster. Wink.
Spoiler.
Sorry, spoiler. Humans are the monster. So, in the show, that's what we're going to get into. We're the monster now, and that's what we're going to get into. My earbud is it's really fuzzing my brain out. I'll see what's up with that in a minute. But Kyle, let's jump over to your screen and see what you've got cooking up in the lab late one night.
Oh yes, blue. So this has some audio, so I'll roll it with audio and then let it loop and turn that off. So longtime viewers of the show will, of course, recognize a few guest stars here in the little blue hand here, and, of course, the hand scratch wipe here that we have covered in previous episodes. But, like I said, kind of a cartoony, silly, but a little spooky situation here. We've got the glorpy text as kind of the star, and then I leaned into this hand pun way too much and probably let that kind of overtake the concept quite a bit, but here we are. So I've got a couple different elements of this that I'm planning to talk about, but if you have something specific that you want me to cover, let us know, because that's the whole point of the show. Tell us in the comments what you want to see more of, what you want to see way less of, and that's what we'll talk about for the next 51 minutes here.
Oh, people are demanding less Evan. Interesting.
Oh, boy, that backfired.
Yeah, but hey, for now, here is my screen, and you'll notice our interfaces are a little bit different because I have the accessibility options turned on with mine, so you can enjoy high contrast going on here, and anyway, just a helpful thing to be doing. And now you can enjoy this spoopy title here. We got some tracking troubles.
Well, let's make that big. Come on.
All right, we'll get bigger with it. Hey, get bigger with that.
Hit that tilde key.
We're gonna get even bigger. Fill the whole frame. So this is Spoopy, a murder design hellline film, obviously. There's a lot of degradation going on with this. So the idea is I'm hearkening back to a kind of grindhouse vibe of these videos, and I'm saying video instead of film because it was mostly shot on VHS videotape. And so there are a lot of like tracking errors and problems, or they were being shot on kind of the cheapest film stock we could acquire, right? So it's not it's not your high-end digital video like today. It is fraught with errors and processing problems and someone smoking in the developing room and all
But
of
then
this.
people like us have to spend a lot of time in post to make it look like the bad film that it was.
Yeah. You know, unless you're doing like a Blair Witch situation where, you know, the crudiness is the point of it, and we just film it on a VHS or a mini DV camcorder, right? You know, why are we messing around with it? Get the tracking on there. But yeah, so that's the type of thing that I'll be just getting into. So the tracking troubles, some of the treatment ideas here, some of this graininess and glowiness that's going on, the kind of layering of process stuff on top of each other, and then if there's time, we'll get into a little bonus extra of some chromatic aberration stuff, which is another, we'll say, artifact of this type of processing that as light goes through a lens, if there's something wrong with the lens, you know, it ends up shearing the waves kind of, or the wavelengths of light away from each other, and you can end up with this sort of troubled treatment of of tones as it comes out. So you end up with that. And some people just use it for an effect, right? Like, oh, interesting, blah, blah, blah. Like, but also like, I don't know. I get into this with lens flares. Like, you can't have two different sources, or two different intersections of lens flares, right? Like,
Well, unless it looks cool, and then you can.
that's true. If you're J.J. Abrams, you can do whatever you want with lens flares. No one can stop you. But lens flares are determined by the glass through which they travel, not by the source of the thing. It's just light. Anyway, let's Kyle, let's start in with yours first. Let's
Okay,
do that.
you know what? Before we do that, just kind of a reminder for anyone who's new to the show. The whole point of this show is that we take questions that you send us and we turn it into a show like this. Now, some days we just take something that's fun for us because it's coming up to Halloween, for example. But if you have any kind of question about After Effects or other motion design related stuff, send it our way. We'll turn it into a show. There's a link right down below us, or you can, of course, always do that at motiondesignhotline.com, which is, of course, Evan.
Oh, it's a real website for real people.
True.
That's how it works.
If you're a fake person, don't use it.
Yeah, no fakers. That's critical. We throw those, anything from a faker, we put in a trash. But the big thing though, like sometimes we collect them and like try to make a big show, and we get a bunch of things that are kind of related to each other. Sometimes there's just new features, and we're excited to talk about those. So anyway, it's all over the place. And sometimes we have wacky crossover events. More on that later. Kyle, we're gonna go to your screen. Let's get into it. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this thing.
Okay, so I feel like maybe I'll start with something really easy here, pretty straightforward. And just because this is a pretty simple technique, but it kind of gives like a nice little traditional horror vibe. Just the logo reveal up here. You know what? Nice little bite-sized thing to ease us in. So we've just got our logo coming up here, and let's just dive in and take a look at that. So this particular project is overflowing with pre-comps. That is the thing that I usually try to avoid, but it was the best way to do it in this case. So that's kind of a good workflow lesson too. Do the thing that works. I'm a big fan of essential properties and, putting a ton of effects on one layer, but sometimes it's just easier to tuck things away and use them as one piece. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so for our logo, I just have kind of a very traditional thing. I didn't really even animate this. I just pulled this from our branding project, and it kind of has some very basic like pop on, but I didn't even use that. I should have just, I'm basically using this as a still, okay? So in the actual build project, let's just solo that bad boy. A lot of pre-rendering in this project as well. Because some of this got pretty heavy.
Before you're too far down the line, pre-rendering. What means pre-rendering?
Yeah, so a good example here We'll get to this in a little bit, but I have this animated hand, for example. And I can talk more about this, but we have a whole episode where we talked about how I built stuff like this. And you'll see it's wiggling around. This is a video file because instead of using several instances of this pretty heavy pre-composition, I just rendered it out as a video file with alpha, and then I could use the 15 instances of that, and it was very easy, very fast to work. So
right, and
pre-rendering so that I can use a video file that makes it fast to work.
Yeah, and I think like you see a lot of people, they got like, man, I got like 5,000 layers or whatever going on in here. Like, maybe some of those should be baked down because if you're not touching them anymore, let's move on. You know,
and I'll point this out. That's this whole comp right here, up to a certain point, is just all pre-rendered. Everything under here is baked into this layer that I can, of course, turn off if I decide I want to change something. But that way, for the finishing bits that I did in this other composition, like getting all the extra grungy treatments and then the final like hand scratchy situation. See, this is what happens when I've turned off the pre-render. There we go. Getting this going on and stuff. That all kind of had to be on top of that stuff anyway, so it was easier to just bake everything down, make it fast.
Oh, we got a question in here.
Interesting.
Are there any tools that will tell you how someone with high photosensitivity will react to video? I know that there are specific. There's some. I think one is called Baton, Baton, and I believe the Telestream company makes one as well. So those are. They're not cheap, I don't think. And which is a bummer because accessibility should not be behind a paywall.
Yeah, agree.
But they tend to be for people in a broadcast sense because those are the people who hold the liability for it. So those might be tools to check out. And those are things to ponder. I mean, Netflix gets around it just by saying, "Hey, this warning. This video might kill you. Just a heads up." But we don't have such a warning on this channel. But the other thing is sometimes on the client side, or we'll say on the user side, we have tools that people install on their machines that protect them from that photosensitive people can use to protect themselves from video stuff coming at them. But when you don't have your own device and you're somewhere out in the wild, kablam, you get smashed by something in the middle of Times Square. Anyway, Evan's PSA about accessibility over.
It's an important thing. Admittedly, one I don't know enough about.
The true horror was people again, Kyle.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Put that marker on the board a number of times the monster was people.
All right. So coming back to this little logo reveal, it's nothing too groundbreaking, but it's a pretty simple technique and it's very adaptable. So it's something I wanted to call out really quickly here. I am mostly just using an effect called gradient wipe here. So let's take a look at the effects on here. I'm using a little bit of wave warp here as well. Just good old wave warp, nothing too fancy. I'm animating the height away, so as this comes up, it's kind of woo, and then it straightens out. That's all. But what's doing most of the work here is gradient wipe, which lets you use the black and white values of some other layer to reveal this one. So anytime that you want to break up a reveal of something, this is a great way to go. What I'm using in this case is this other fractal noise layer that I just kind of, messed with a little bit. Did 2 instances of fractal noise, as I like to do, because just a reminder, fractal noise has a blending mode built right into it, so you can stack up multiple instances and use something like multiply or screen, so you can add kind of different layers of movement and texture to something just to kind of create whatever look you want. So then I can reference that layer as part of the gradient wipe effect. You can just say, yep, look at that thing. Make sure you're looking at effects and masks if you want that. Keeps you from needing to pre-compose in this case. And then you just have a little transition completion slider that animates the thing on and off, but according to those white and black levels. So you could use a gradient. You can break it up with fractal noise like this. Great way to make something a little more organic, or in this case, if you want to kind of feel like clouds or spookiness or whatever. Great way to do it.
Yeah. Oh, it's really coming out of the spookiness right now. But yeah, like, because sometimes we would think, oh, the thing is coming out of the fog, so I'm gonna have a fog layer, and I'm gonna dissolve the fog layer with it. That's not really what's, visually what's going on. Is this thing is just becoming, away from the background, so it's getting bigger and is resolving. So yeah, fog, clouds, smoke, wisps. You could use layers. You could use videos. You could use any ding dang layer.
Anything.
Please.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything that has white and black values, which is pretty much anything you can see.
anything on the machine. But yeah, like, I think gradient wipe does not get enough play. So try it out.
That's exactly why I wanted to call it out. I love using it like anytime. A lot of times I will use it like I'm doing here in combination with fading the opacity of the layer. So you get it just adds a little bit of organicness. And here, it's a little over the top because I'm kind of going for like cartoony, spooky. But a lot of times just breaking up a fade a little bit, just slap even like default fractal noise, give that a little bit of movement, and then you just get a little bit of a like boom as the thing fades on. Great little tip.
I sometimes use it in combination with like a mosaic type of thing. So then it's like bloop, 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 bloop.
Yep.
It's a little bit cornier, but
I mean, it's a great utility effect because it's whatever you need it to be.
Yeah. It's like when I'm doing my early 90s dissolves of things, that's a great place to go. Sick. Okay. Anything else about this reveal that you want to get into?
I mean, that's really all that there is for that one. Obviously, I've got plenty of other things that we can get into in this project, but that felt like a nice little smooth entry point. If you have a little bite-sized thing that we can do, and then we'll come back for my glorp.
Oh, we're gonna go to Evan's screen, and yeah, let's get into a transition that is a bit more jarring, perhaps. So, in my piece here, I opted to transition stuff on with this chunk here at the beginning, right? This kind of like tracking problem that is resolving gradually, right? And that it's a similar type of idea that like you could just have this like snap onto the screen, right? Or it's there 1 minute, it's not there the next. There's no dissolving or anything happening, but because we're going from more chaotic to more certain, it feels like a transition of some kind. So that's kind of the idea with this. And this is done. Go into the tracking problems isolated. That's my noise of doing tracking. It's all linked up to a singular slider. So if anytime you are planning this type of idea for yourself, you want to think about what is causing the disturbance, and then what's causing the disturbance in the house, Kyle. You want to rig up your E-meters, and then you want to see what the poltergeist is at. But similar type of idea here with poltergeists, you really want to turn this into one value that can control the whole thing, from wackiness to normalness is what we want to be doing. So we're looking to link those things together. And your idea of what is wacky might be totally different from mine, right? That's the big kind of thing. For me, I was looking at the properties of, and we can see them if I tap the E key twice, you're going to see all the things that I linked up together here. So I went for an offset, which is going to give us the idea that something is scrolling. And then I went for a transform skew, the amount that something is skewing, and the actual axis on which it is skewing. But to you, maybe this needs to be like a displacement, right? I'm going to use turbulent displace, and I'm going to mess with that. Or I want to use scale. I want to feel like the thing is scaling out of control. So thinking about what means wacky to you, and then in this case, now why did I choose these ones? Because in horror films, as Kyle, you and I were talking, for some reason, projection and recording of horror films, the scariest thing is that the technology isn't being well maintained.
Yep. All of the technicians were the first to die, and so Yeah, just every piece of film equipment is in extremely bad condition.
I believe it's because the filmmakers themselves fear harm to their prints, and so that's why the idea of someone mishandling their prints is the most horrifying thing. Like, I just spent a year making this thing, and you fed it through the machine, and now it's all burned. Ah, you burned up my negatives. You know, that's why so many characters are writers, right, in horror things. Like, oh, the genius writer was tormented by demons, the demons of the evil editor creature. Like,
Revision, the super handsome genius writer.
That's right, whom everyone liked and had lots of skills applicable to the world, but no one listened to his genius, and that's why they're all dead. Oh, it's fun to rip on. Adaptation, good movie. So in this case, right, the reason why I went with offset, skew axis, I'm trying to mimic the idea of something is out of phase as it is rotating through. And then the skewing is if the film is maligned or loose as it goes through. This is what the film would be doing.
I believe that's called gate weave.
Oh, you got that gate weave. Come over here and I'll pull out your gate weave.
Whoa.
It's gate weave sounds like a type of hairstyle. Yeah, we'll look into it. But anyway.
we can get that working.
Exactly. Could you imagine if someone for Halloween put a bunch of film into their hair and went as gate weave? I think that'd be pretty good.
I can imagine that, and that's a good idea for the right crowd.
Yeah. For some people, that's correct and good. Yeah. Anyway, think about making your Halloween costume a pun. So in this case, that's what we're doing. And it's going to normalize. So what is kind of the order of operations that gets us there? I'm going to actually disable a lot of these. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So I can kind of play with the numbers and you can see how they are going to behave. And the other thing that's important is I've done all of this on an adjustment layer. And that's because anything that will happen to this, so if I just go ahead and hit the old reset button on some of these, anything I'm doing under this, right, is going to have this happen to it. So fill it up with whatever you want, and then we're just going to put this layer over top of it. So the shifting center of an offset effect is really just that. It's going to loop around the other side when it comes out. So if we loop the vertical, whee! Oh, it's
pretty much the basis of any film and video like vertical roll effect.
Yeah, so the offset's your best friend. The other bit of business is skewing it. But here's an important part. Which order do these go in, right? So if I transform like this, and then I offset like this, oh, hey, look at that. The S up here is still available to us, right? And it's taking a lot longer to come back through the thing. Interesting. What's that all about? Well, let's switch the order on that. Now, I don't remember if this is gonna. No, that's still gonna be pretty good. Oh, there it is. So this is the result of the order of operations of these things. What happens first? What happens second? So that's pretty critical when you're mushing these things together. And the other one is, I don't need it in this case, but sometimes you need to use a motion tile or something to increase the size of the thing. Then you
grow bounds is a good go-to.
Yeah, so motion tile, grow bounds, reptile, these are your friends if you are finding that, I'm getting weird seams going on. It's like, don't worry, we got effects for that. Because this is kind of alone and isolated in the middle of the world, it didn't end up being too much of a thing for me. And then the skew axis, so let's say I skew it this much. The axis is the axis upon which it doth skew. And you can see that we get this kind of lovely warpiness to it if you just rack the skew axis. So I think one of the things that I do when I'm kind of building up or developing these sorts of things is that I play around and I see like, well, what happens when I just rack this thing, So do that, and hopefully that will that'll kind of spark something. And The other thing I recommend doing is kind of building it up in layers. Start with what you think your primary mover is going to be, and then more and more and more.
I mean, that's sort of, obviously we're not quite there yet, but that's sort of a good segue for the way my thing is built too. Like it's very much, you have to think through the pieces that you need so that you can get to the thing.
Yeah. So critical to don't try to do it all at once, you know. How did the zombie eat the whale? One bite at a time. So you can adapt any joke to be about Halloween if you just change who it's about.
But he wasn't very happy about it. He was blubbering the whole time.
Boo. There we go. It's not saying brains anymore. It's saying Balines now. So
that was...
Oh no, it's getting worse. So okay, so like I said, the control of this is a slider that is just gonna run from 100 down to like 0 or not quite 0, and then maybe I push it back up to like 50% and back down. Get it down to one number. How do we get one number to control all of this? You should go as Chapel Grown. That's pretty good. Okay, what if I went with as old Chapel Rowan and I'm Chapel Grown with a W? So now she's old. Yeah. It's literally just pretending to be a grandma who is Chapel Rowan. Okay, so in this case, transform, skew. What is going on with this? Well, there's a few things that are critical. The first is I'm just going to bring in a variable that will stand in for the magnitude of the change. So we're looking at that magnitude slider, which is really the thing that is changing. So how magnanimous, how large is the change? I divide that by 100, which can be kind of a percentage, and then multiply that by 20. 20 is kind of our magnitude number here, that I'm deciding 20 is the number that I'm going to put in here. That will probably change depending on what the actual variance is. But the divide by 100 is pretty critical because I'm using one number, 0 to 100, to stand in for all of these things. And that means something different for each one of these. So we really have to try to bring that number down to something that's going to compute for everything else and just kind of logic it out. I could just say, well, I'm going to just divide it by 2,000. That's 100 times 20. You can do that instead. But segmenting it up this way can really help get the logic down for what you're doing, and makes it easier for me to think, this is the number I'm going to change if I'm going to change something.
Makes it a bit more human readable.
Yeah.
And if all this code stuff is scary, you can just keyframe all these properties.
True.
We're both nerds, and so we like to kind of give ourselves one control if we can.
That's true. And in 2024, I think code is one of the most terrifying villains available to us. Like that evil algae rhythm from the Space Jam movie. The new Space Jam movie. The one that doesn't acknowledge it's a sequel to the other Space Jam movie. All right. And then the other factor that I'm bringing is a random number. Variable r equals random between -1 and 1. When you use the random thing, you're just saying this side to this side. Give me a random number between -1 and 1. That means that I'm going to have play on either side of 0. I don't need to use very big numbers because, honestly, when you're multiplying these things out, it just kind of compounds. Like I could have said, give me a random number between -20 and 20, and then I throw away this number 20 over here because I don't need it anymore. But really, working with small numbers is easier because my mind doesn't like the big numbers. So hopefully that makes sense to people. But yeah, then the final line here is just m times r, the magnitude times the randomness, and then you're in the zone, right? If you were to bring magnitude down to 0, this is back to 0 because 0 times whatever be 0. That's the thing that we're doing. That's the joy of it. And then a similar thing is happening on the skew axis, right? Except that the sort of range is a little bit different because the axis is tipping across a different boundary. Things a little bit wackier over here on the offset. We are shifting the center on this thing, and the height is what's going on. I don't want to prattle on too much about this because of the terrifying nature of it. If you want to get into the code specifically, if you want to hack into the matrix, or if you want to go full lawnmower man on this, that guy controlled computers with his mind, right?
I think so.
Okay. Well, he became a computer. It's
The
confusing.
Yeah, the graphics that exist in my head back that up.
Yeah, he went into a computer. Go to motiondesignhotline.com, download this stuff, play around with it. You'll see, and heck, put your own stuff behind this and just use it.
Mhm.
No one's
There
going
you
to
go.
stop you.
Yep. That is part of why an adjustment layer works well. You can put literally anything underneath this, not literally anything, most things,
Yeah.
and it'll give the same effect.
You could also just go ahead and make this into a preset. So if you wanted to have that, then you could be enjoying that. And when you deploy it, the preset will deploy it to a layer, and then you'll be ahead of the game already. So if that's part of your life, do it like that. So that's the idea for this bring type of thing, that because I can shift this from a small number to a big number or a negative number, right? I now have full control over basically bringing this type of transition on and off. Therefore, I'm simply keyframing the percentage of that transition that I want occurring. And that's the idea, to bring it off and on. Without this, all that's happening is bonk, blonk. That's it. But with this over top of it, then we get like that. So the sounds happen in my mind for
mine too.
Now they happen for you, the viewer, to let you in on the experience. But that's the idea. That's a transition being done by simply offsetting and skewing and messing with what's underneath it. In the pre-comping, Kyle mentioned the importance of pre-comping earlier. We're back on that theme, that this tracking problems treatment is happening in its own thing, because all of that adjustment would bork up what is happening under it, and we really only care about borking up the titles in this case. This could be over top of footage. This could be over top of, I want to say, a vision of suburbia that where evil lurks just beneath the surface and behind every picket fence. David Lynch. So this is just something to think about. Get your titles down to sort of one pre-comp, and then you can smack those things over top of other things. Evan's talk time over. We're going to go back to Kyle and get a little deeper into the glorp zone over here.
Okay. Do we have something of yours to come back to, or am I doing the rest of the time here?
We could talk about chromatic aberrations if we've got time.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. All right. Since we were talking expressions, I exposed a couple of simple ones that I was using here. So obviously a big part of the horror aesthetic, as we said, you've got bad mechanical stuff happening with your film. There's also a lot of dirt and grime that you kind of put on. So I have several layers of kind of vignetting and dirt flecks and all that business. And I just wanted to call out an easy way to make that work. So I have just this texture layer right here. Let's go ahead and just show you what that looks like. This is just a thing I grabbed from Unsplash or whatever it may be. Pexels, excuse me. And so I just have this set to multiply, and then I made it black and white, crunched the levels a little bit so that I could kind of control, how extreme that is, right? But if you want that to hop around, let me get rid of that. There we go. Get rid of that music. So if you want this to hop around a little bit, even just see, it's pretty subtle here. But that way it gives everything a little bit of a just, uncertain vibe. Nothing is quite settled, right? Yeah. This case, I'm using position, just a simple wiggle right here, just a little bit. But a thing that I use all the time, and especially on this, is posterize time. So you're posterizing the time of whatever is in this expression, and then my wiggle. So...
and I'll just cut in. I gotta go do something with my headphones. You pretend like I'm not here.
All right. Hopefully he doesn't magically break my audio by adjusting his headphones. So just wanted to call this out. You can crunch it down. So this is a good way to kind of make like a poppy wiggle, which is exactly what I've done here. And then you could say whatever frames per second you want that to be, because that's what this is right here. How many times per second you want that thing to happen. And you can have different ones on different layers, and then that creates even more of a wonkiness. Evan is, I love this. And he can't hear me laughing, which is good. And then just a slightly different version of this. For my dirt here, just another layer of fractal noise, and I've got the evolution. instead of actually just animating it, I'm doing just a random value here. I use this one a lot. And again, posterized. So it's just kind of clicking through different places of the phase. And that's a great way to get some flecks of dirt, grime like this. Then maybe make a second version of it with slightly different settings. And this is a place where you could have them, you can see here, 2 different times. So you can have one of them as actually moving at twice the speed. Just kind of helps give that chaotic vibe, right? Yeah, hopefully Evan is okay over there. All right, so this is primarily about this glorpy text, said the episode description. And so let me kind of talk through how I built this. I started out by, here we go, figuring out the animation of the actual hero bit here, okay? And you can see this is a little heavy, so even with it turned down, it takes a little bit to render because I extruded the thing. One thing about pre-composing is that you really need to kind of be decisive about your elements, because if you're pre-composing, then they start, being kind of tucked away in little pockets, and they get a little bit harder to adjust. To answer a quick question I saw, I think there's a question about whether what I was showing a second ago were images that I was using, and yes, they were just images being moved around or generated through fractal noise. So here I just have 2 instances of this text. I probably could have done this with one. I just used a text layer, and then I ended up turning this into shape layers because it was just a little thicker than what I wanted. This is the default text, and I wanted to be able to kind of crunch those lines in a little bit. And it felt like I'd be able to do what I wanted more easily if I converted those to shape layers. So just to point that out, you can always right-click on any text layer, create shapes from text, and then you could animate the paths. Or, like I did in this case, I used a offset paths so that I could crunch that in a little bit and get, I knew that once I was putting all the effects on here, I was going to need like a little bit more room in the holes and the gaps around the letters. And crucially, I could have the extruded version feel slightly different from that. And so, that's interesting. And so that I could kind of have things line up in the way that I wanted to. I'm not sure why the D disappeared. Did I turn that off? I did. Okay. So that gives you kind of something to work with here. And then, of course, I have the hand tacked on. This is all just being driven by one little null object that's just moving everything in. So once I kind of have that hero element, that movement confirmed, then I can start adding my look on top of it, okay? But you really want to make sure that you kind of have this in, because especially the way that I had to work here, I wouldn't say it's destructive per se, but it becomes harder to adjust once you start using this in several other places. You back with us?
Kyle, I can hear your beautiful voice again.
Good. Oh. And we could hear you rummaging around for your headphones, which was added some delightful chaos.
It's great. You really find out that our reliance on a battery-operated technology is bad, and we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. I'm all about wired stuff when you don't need to actually go anywhere.
Well, I mean, and I really, splashed out for these wonderful in-ear monitors, right? Like, these are really good. I get to enjoy your voice in crystal clear, unmodulated.
That's great, Evan. I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh man! So just so people are aware, the difference between monitoring and regular headphones is an unsweetening factor that gives you an unvarnished sound. Whether you enjoy that, your mileage may vary. Just a heads up. Oh, anyway, Kyle, please continue with that.
Yes. So once I had this good, and this is a case, we've kind of talked about this before. I was certainly looking at this in context here, and I developed a lot of the other elements, and got the timing of that other logo, and kind of temped in the various vignetting and effects. And you can see some of those some of that grime and dirt exist in here that I then later turned off and kind of put back on in the actual export composition. So a lot of this build was kind of figuring things out and then making sure I put those pieces in the right places. Okay. So once I had, here we go. Once I had kind of dialed this in, then I needed to start using this hand hero element in a couple other places, because we eventually need to get to a place where we are adding kind of our glorp, as well as a couple different effects on the type itself. So let's look at creating that glorp, which is, okay, so I created a duplicate of my little hand animation here. I didn't need the actual hand, the little blue hand doesn't need to be there because that's not glorp, right? So we just have our hand word. And so I made just a duplicate of that other composition and then use this. So this is the one that's going to be used in a few other places. And you can always press your tab key for your little mini flow chart and see where else this is going. So I'm using this in my glorp particles here. So I am using a particle generator, and had I used a third-party particle generator, I probably would have had a little easier time here. Could have tracked this better, but I wanted to use a default one so that you could access these settings. So I'm using CC Particle World, which I really like, except that the positioning of the particle generator is not, it's not actually in comp space. It's just these little sort of zeroed out things. And like when you get way over here, it's 1. So it's kind of hard to map that to anything. So I just had to kind of ballpark it. And that worked fine for what I was doing here. But generally speaking, whatever particle generator you want to use here, I kind of wanted some bubbly stuff that happened over my text and kind of tracked with it. So I did a little bit of movement. I tried it with the actual position mover here, and I ended up liking it better by just moving this entire pre-composition, which you'll see in a second. But you know, using something like particular would have been a little better to kind of get the physics of the producer moving and the things kind of lagging behind it, get some more like air resistance and things like that. So feel free to use whatever you want. I will point out another one that I hadn't really, didn't end up using here, but I think would be a really good case here is CC Snowfall. Because if you just want a bunch of things to kind of glorp their way over your stuff, let's just turn these up so you can see them better and get the, there's an opacity here. There we go. So CC Snowfall is, of course, just falling particles. You'll find a lot of these simulation and generate things are actually just particle generators with different effects. So I didn't feel like this was one I could quite dial in the amount I wanted to, but you do have wind in here, for example. And so I think this could be a really smart way to make something like this. And then if you need to turn it around, you can just rotate the layer and then it's going upwards to make it spooky like mine was. So, you know, try these things out. CC Foam is another great one where you can make particles follow a path, for example. Okay, so let's take a look at where we're actually using this thing, okay? However you generate these particles, whatever you're doing with them. Now, I have another composition called drips, and you can kind of see I have just a guide layer version of that text just so that I can see it for my own reference here. But here I'm really just making the bubbles and kind of restricting them to that word, okay? So how am I doing that? Well, I've got my particles, and you'll see I've got some echo on them so that they become more like glorpy lines than just dots. And in an ideal world, I would maybe use 2 or 3 versions of this and vary those echoes so that I would have glorps of different lengths. But I just used 1 in this case. And you can see here, like I was talking about, let me turn that to a different color for you. I just kind of approximated this move here and got it close enough. It's okay if these like slide just a little bit on here. I thought that kind of added to a little bit of momentum, but feel free to dial something like that in however you like. But we need to restrict this to the word, but also not just to the word. So that means we need a version of the word that we can modify, which is a pre-comp right here. Let me turn off these effects. So here's that hand pre-comp, that word base that we were using just a minute ago. It's just that, simple animation there. And then I use our old friend CC Scale Wipe that can smear something way up. So now the particles can, if I'm using this as a matte, which I will be doing in a minute, the particles can exist on the text, but also above it, right? They can flow upwards. And then
gradient wipe and smear wipe getting some love today.
Yeah, right. You can, of course, use this as a transition of some kind, but just a great way to extend something in a specific way. You get a, I've already animated it here, but let me just kind of drag this around. You get one of those little sort of position controls, so you can be very intentional about how this, where this thing is stretching from and which direction it's stretching into and stuff. So it's just can be a really great utility effect when you need to get kind of that specific kind of distortion here.
Right. And in this case, you really just care about the area it occupies. Right. So even if it looks like nasty around the edges, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm about to make it look nastier because I just need a matte. So I dipped into.
Folks. It's about to get nastier here on the screen.
So nasty. So I dipped into Mini Max so that I could fatten that back up just a little bit here, and then roughen edges so that everything could get a little bit of glorp. I have my resolution turned down here. Let's make that better.
Right. Okay. So
there you go.
Maybe talk a bit more about Minimax, because I don't know.
Okay.
This is another one of those powerful utilities that I don't think people like. Oh, why are my boundaries whatever? Why, I'm getting this pixel shear. Why is this nastiness happening to me? Boom.
Okay, so Minimax. By default, this is what you get. And if you just start, need to turn it on. If you just start cranking this number up, you may kind of get stuff. It may or may not be what you want. You have different modes in here. So if you want to crunch something inwards, you can set this to minimum. And I generally like to set this to alpha and color, and then you can use this as like a choker, okay? So you can crunch your thing inward. Or you can set this to maximum, and then you can crunch the thing outward. So this is a great utility, especially if you just need like a couple extra pixels around something, okay?
Yeah.
And then there's ways you can use some of these other, crunch it in and then go out. I would experiment with these. They're a little more special case, but they can be very useful.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
It's Minimax is really light. Like it takes almost no processing to do, and contrast that to a lot of people would say, "Oh, I'm going to use the matte choker, right, to push my boundary out and in," which is more accurate sometimes, but gives
heavier.
And causes a smoothness to something.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you can tell it's very blocky, right? Like it's like its nearest neighbor, bigger cube type of deal. And when you're making mattes, you don't really care as much. As much, right?
I'll use this a lot when you can use this for like text creating, using a recipe to like create text layers box that lives on itself, for example, because you just need to make it bigger, and then you can use something else to kind of like restrict within an area. Anyway, Minimax is great. You can set it to just vertical, for example, and like I probably could have used this to get that same vertical stretch, but I wanted it to be restricted to only go upwards. So that's hence scale wipe. Let me undo several times to get back to where I was. I think probably there. Because I just wanted to beef it up just a little bit, right? And then let me turn that scale wipe on. I wanted to smooth everything out, kind of glorp it up a little bit here. So roughen edges, just kind of fiddle with those until you're happy. And then I needed to make sure I didn't lose these gaps. So you can see this mask sitting on top. And then this little blue thing right here, that says, hey, this effect is using a mask as the matte for the effect. So this effect is only visible within that mask, all right? We've done this before, but just in case, it's under compositing options, and you can just press this little plus here, and then choose the mask on the layer that you want to use. And so, boop, this solid composite effect only exists within that mask that I just kind of rough tracked onto here. There were probably ways I could have done this totally procedurally, but this was fast, and so there we go. So now I have this thing that looks horrifically ugly, but I can use it as a matte for those particles. See, I've just used my track matte feature right here. And so those can only exist in that slightly expanded, slightly glorped up version of the text. And so you can see I start getting little blobs that extend a little bit beyond the visible word. And so when I composite them together in the other comp in a second, that's exactly what you'll start seeing. So then we have this all layered up here.
Also,
and
five-minute warning.
I know, I see it. A lot of this is just kind of like glorping things up again. I ended up doing these on, I did this in the advanced render, which I probably didn't need to. So I was using a solid layer with calculations. Don't worry about that part if that's confusing. But you'll see there's a couple, let me just, because the text itself, I wanted to have some vibes, right? And so let's just quickly look at those. Wave warp, another wave warp, some roughen edges again, some levels to kind of crunchitize that, a fractal noise that sits on top, so you get a little bit of surface glorp, and then a little bit of displacement map from the bubbles that we just made. And then this is just a little expression selector I did just so that those things like roughen edges and fractal noise, I could tie some of those effects to a little point control that was following the null that I had animated earlier so that those things don't swim all over the place when this layer moves, okay? And then I did similar things on the extruded version of this, slightly different settings so that they would glorp in a little different way. And then you add on the drips over the top. Let's get the drips over this here. So there's my bubbles that you saw just a minute ago. And then a lot of those same effects, a lot of this is just to kind of, glob things up. So you got some fill to make the color, roughen edges again. Here's a lot of the fun part, CC plastic, so that you get kind of that, you get a little bit, start looking like raised bubbles. Another wave warp, a little bit of displace, this stuff. And then one crucial thing, just to make it feel like these were kind of detaching I wanted them to kind of roll over the text, but then also kind of detach. But I felt like they should get smaller when they did. So I kind of split this into two versions. So I have one that's only over the word, and then one that is only above. And that one is just crunched in further. So as soon as the drops leave the word, it's kind of like a smaller version. The word's holding on to more of the bubble, okay? So this is a lot of compositing stuff, but it's like using the same effects over and over on different layers with slightly different settings.
Boom. Whew. Man, Kyle, we had you talk fast at the end of this episode, so it's a break from our usual. But I think that'll do it. I think we've hit a lot of spooky, scary Halloween stuff. So. Plenty
more to dive into in both of these, which means if you want to, go grab the project file. It'll be up in probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. The other thing I saw in the chat, there was some talk about, suggestions for other styles and other types of videos people were interested in. Hit us up in the forum. So the forum is the best place if you're watching this in the future or the past or however through the nexus of time you're watching this and you want us to cover something, motiondesignhotline.com, get in the forum. And I'll say this, we've been doing this show for a while. We're almost at at least 2 years of doing it.
Yeah, we're coming up on 100 episodes pretty soon.
Yeah, so a lot of things we have covered, and you can check a whole archive of the things. Our kind of titling convention is a little weird. It is more alliterative and poetic than it is informative and useful. But, go through the back catalog. You might see some stuff. I'm pretty sure we try to hit the meta tags like collage and photo and cutout and stuff like that. But if people are asking for it, we can just keep doing similar stuff again. If we don't have
You
to
can
come up
always
with,
ask us, and sometimes I'll say, "Oh, we did that. Check out this episode."
yeah,
That's fine too.
yeah. We have the power to do these things. But yeah, that's the idea. Do I have to fill the form again for the specific animation request? I already filled out the form. For anything that's specific, let us know in the form. I don't know, keep filling it out with stuff. It's useful to us. It's worst case scenario. There's just multiple stuff in there for us.
I will say sometimes we have a thing that we're sitting on and waiting until we get a couple of similar things before we make that into a show. So
True.
Sometimes it may not be immediate.
Well, there's also a backlog of like a lot of people put things in the form. So anyway, we don't do it like right away. It's not like next week. We've already got something awesome happening next week. That's why I had to go. That's why I went to the 2-shot. Next week we have a collaboration coming up. So much closer to spooky, scary Halloween. I don't know if Evan and Kyle will be on the stream. There may be some other.
We will.
Wink.
Briefly, at least.
Yeah, for a brief period. But yeah, we are collaborating with a wonderful next-gen designer. I don't want to give too many spoilies away, so you'll just have to tune in and find out. It's a big takeover day here on the streams. So anyway, that's what we're doing next week, animating a poster. I think you're going to like it. Kyle, we can find you at Kylosaurus Rex on the internet. You can find me at EC Abrams all over the internet. We're also on Blue Sky, so if people are interested in that, you can find us on all the places plus Blue Sky. But yeah, we got a rich full day of activities here on Adobe Live, so keep it locked. Keep it locked here on the program, and we will see you all next week. Stay creative, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all around the internet.
Stay spooky.
Yeah, stay spooky, everyone. All right, bye for now.